brushy morph. I think I'm going to travel by pony from here.
So just in respect to the MSIC or ASIC card, people, employers actually advertise, employ people, do their own character checks, do their own criminal checks, do their own assessment of the appropriateness or otherwise of the person for the task. And it's only at that juncture that they then apply for an ASIC or a MSIC card. Is that correct?
It depends on the employment and the role. If they are to work in the airside area of an airport or in the sterile area of an airport, they need unescorted access, they would need to have an ASIC, and often industry operators will actually make that a prerequisite in terms of their employment conditions. And that applies also for those people that are working in a port environment where they need access to a security sensitive area, a secure zone. Again, often they make it a condition of employment that they are eligible to get that card.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to make the point that they don't go and apply for an ASIC card and then apply for a job. They apply for a job, and that employer has all the normal checks and balances that applies to its operation, including criminal history checks, character checks and suitability for the job. And at that point, they then have a condition that they must be able to get an ASIC or a MSIC card to secure the employment.
I wouldn't like to comment on individual companies' employment procedures.
Why not? They don't apply for a job with you, they don't work for you.
And that's what I'm saying. I don't want to speculate on what their requirements might be
to
employ people.
Well, no, in fairness, it is speculation, but
Well,
women wouldn't know the answer to the question.
Can we move away from speculation then? My understanding is that the AET has dealt with a case where a gentleman was working for an extended period for an employer who essentially was using a stopgap method to give them unsupervised access airside, and then the ASIC process denied them an ASIC because of a criminal record, but that was overturned by the AET. Can you give me some more details on that?
I couldn't comment on the individual case. Firstly, I don't have those details, and there'd be privacy concerns if I was to talk about an individual case, but I can give you some general...
I think the judgment is on the public record, though, if I recall correctly.
I'm not sure the details would be... I mean, we can look that up, but I wouldn't know exactly which case you're referring to. I can talk very generally, though, about the AAT and our experiences in the AAT.
You know, please do. I'm going to quick Google search and see if I can... see if it's on the public record.
So we've certainly had at least one case where an ASIC applicant has successfully challenged our Secretary's decision to refuse a card despite the applicant's serious criminal record, and that
Do you know what the criminal record was, just so we can keep it in context?
The criminal history included convictions with significant terms of imprisonment for offences involving both dishonesty and the production, possession and supply of a narcotic substance, and also related to the importation of a significant quantity of cocaine using air freight. And in committing that offence, the applicant acted alone. And sorry, if I could just add, a particular concern was the applicant's proposed employment with an air courier company.
So, can I take you to the Herald Sun on the March the 8th, 2014? Mr. Maksimovic was identified by federal police as working in the secure areas, even though he was a convicted cocaine smuggler. And the AET upheld his right to have an ASIC. How is that possible?
It's basically because the AAT in that case stated that it must take into account the purpose of our Act as well as the discretion allowed by the regulations, and specifically in that case the AAT noted that the discretion must be exercised in accordance with the language by which it is conferred and to achieve the purposes for which the power has been granted. And as the purpose of the schemes in our Act is specific to preventing unlawful interference, the AAT took a very narrow interpretation of that purpose.
But if we go back to, again, the gang warfare, the weapons, the Cheng, the terrorists, the metro air flight out of Egypt, they're all connected. You know, we have numerous cases that say they're connected. So the reforms that the government's proposing to the legislation, I take it, are an attempt to sever that connection and reform the words of the legislation so the AAT would not be allowed to grant an individual like this unsupervised access airside?
So if you're asking me whether that case would be overturned if we had the changes to the legislation, in all likelihood, no.
Sorry?
Just begs the
That-
question.
Sorry,
what-
that the AAT would not have overturned our decision.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, so if the legislation, which will be before the Senate very shortly,
Yeah.
passes, then the AAT would not be able to overturn my decision to not issue that card.
Do we know who employed this convicted cocaine smuggler to work at an airport?
I don't have that information, Senator.
Why not?
It's not.
I mean, he couldn't have got in there by himself. He had to get a job. And someone had to interview a cocaine smuggler, convicted, and give him a job at an airport. Aren't you avoiding the obvious here?
Well, not if they don't know the answer to the question.
No, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to the question. I guess the company in question, though, would have had the ASIC regime to as a background check, and in this situation, because of the limitations of the legislation at the moment, there is no, foundation that would have picked up those issues with that particular
Well, I
individual.
worked at 12 years at an airport, and no one convicted of drug smuggling or arson or murder or theft got a job because they did character checks. What are you telling me that's different now?
It's all baddies now.
That a convicted
Well,
cocaine smuggler can get a job at an airport and
Yes.
get an ASIC card?
That's what Ms.
That's right. At this
Women's
stage, our
Parliament.
legislation precludes us from taking into account those issues.
We can overcome this. The legislation's coming to a house near you very soon, and you just stick to your spirit and come over to us and we'll be right.
So according to the reports, the individual concerned did not advise his employer despite their questioning of his criminal record. So where the authorities identified the criminal record because he didn't voluntarily disclose it in breach of everything he should have done, to my mind, the authorities then need the weight of law behind them to make sure that that individual cannot actually get that job if he doesn't voluntarily disclose what he should do.
But it's grounds for instant dismissal if you don't disclose
Yeah, I'm
criminal
sure.
charges on your
Too
record.
late
Ms.
once the
Wimmer, what
Metrojet's been blown out
percentage-
of the sky.
What percentage of these people that currently hold cards, do you have any data that might suggest how many of them would be an individual that might be precluded by the pending legislation but are working now?
So we did some modelling of a sample size, a significant sample size of current holders of cards, and this is, I guess, what I can tell you about how it applies. If we move to the regime that will be in front of the Senate, an assessment of the impact of removing the low-level offences, because there is also an intention in this to take out low-level offences which really don't have a significant impact on the security or, criminality that might be involved in those areas, such as an airport or a port. An assessment of the impact of removing the low-level offences from the proposed eligibility criteria finds that the number of applicants found adverse on their initial card application is expected to fall from 500 to 210 per year. And then of the 210 adverse applicants, those that have not been able to receive a card, approximately 30 who are existing card holders would actually be found ineligible. So there is an increase in the number of
So how many
those.
of the 139 who have an ASIC ASI card do you think at the moment would be precluded by the pending legislation?
I don't have the ASIC numbers, so at the moment it would be 30 across the ASIC and MSIC regimes.
Sorry, only 30?
Only 30 who would have sufficiently serious criminality offences.
But that's an extrapolation of the sample.
It is, exactly, on the basis of the current card holders.
Yep. Do these people work in areas like baggage control? Is that regarded as an area where you need a card?
Yes, they may well.
Are there any other questions in this? Well, Senator Duniam has some.